Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Hannah Stahulak and I'm here to make a little video for Drawing Us In Part 2. So this is a collaboration with Bakehouse Art Complex in Miami and also later Artist Residency in Paris. So we've got this really cool worldwide collaboration that's going on right now. I myself am situated in Los Angeles and I'm excited to share a little bit of my own personal artwork with all of you and also give you a demonstration about how I get some of my art going. I can't say I'll finish one in 30 minutes, but I'll kind of show you the steps to get a strong start on something. So I'll just jump right in with my own personal artwork. So let me grab the big one here. My artwork deals mainly with anatomy. So I have a lot of bone drawings that I'm going to show today, but I've delved into many other places in anatomy, you know, muscle tissue, skin, hair, all of that. So here's kind of an example here of what a normal piece for me would look like. This is one of my larger ones. It's on paper and it's 18 by 18, so inches. So this is kind of just giving you an example of the, you know, complexity and the detail that I really enjoy. It's not only just getting the form in, but also kind of getting lost in the process of drawing, which was something that I felt like we talked a lot about in the previous Drawing Us In, if you got a chance to catch that. So drawing for me is really, you know, it's an escape, it's a getaway, and in times like this, it's really been kind of what keeps me going, keeps me sane. And here's kind of a smaller example of that as well here. So a lot of times, most of my, you know, drawings are done in pen, so I'll be showing some pen demonstrating today. These are done with a really fine tip pen. It's about 0.025 millimeters, so really fine skinny lines. It's a ballpoint pen, so it gets a really crisp line and doesn't really, you don't worry about bleeding into the paper as much as some others you might have. So aside from doing these pen and ink sort of drawings, I also like to explore with silverpoint. So for those who don't know what silverpoint is, it's kind of hard to get with the lighting here. There we go, you can kind of see it here. This is using, it looks like maybe a graphite or a lead pencil or ebony pencil. This is actually done with actual metal. So this is a more traditional way of drawing, and it was kind of used a lot of times in history as the drawing before the painting, so kind of the preparatory or the exploratory phase of a lot of artworks. And what's done is that you prime the surface. So this is done on a panel, and it's primed with a white layer of like gesso, kind of like you would a painting. And then that creates a surface where the metal is able to sit on top of. So if I did this on a regular sheet of paper, like this one here, it wouldn't really show up because the paper doesn't have any sort of tooth or anything for it to grab onto. So the neat thing about silverpoint is that it's always kind of evolving, which I enjoy about that too, along with the rich history in the material. And what's neat is that over time the color starts to change. So since this is made with a metal, it will patina. So this one was actually made about 3 years ago. And again, it's kind of hard to see in the video, but it has more of a brownish tint to it, whereas when they are recently finished, they have more of a silvery kind of tone. So I like that the drawing itself is always kind of evolving and changing, even after I feel like I'm personally done making marks. And I've been exploring in silverpoint for quite a few years, and I find it's just a nice way to kind of explore my ideas in a different format. One thing I've been playing around with recently with my silverpoint drawings is adding a little bit of color to it. So if you notice, a lot of my work is devoid of any color in the background. And that's mainly just because I really enjoy just focusing on line, and I feel like that's one of the strongest elements of art, and it stands on its own as it is. And it doesn't usually need a lot of color to support it. So the exploration in color has been fairly recent, but it's still been fun. You know, I'm just constantly trying to invite new ideas and methods into what I'm already interested in making. So here you can kind of see, it's really hard to get it. Well, I might have to turn it like this. The paper has a little bit of a light bluish tone. So this was my first attempt at working with prime paper. So what I did was take gesso again, like I said, as if I was going to prime a canvas or a panel. And what I did was actually use some acrylic paint, and I added a little blue into it, and then just kind of let myself work into it. can kind of see the color. It kind of changes, so it's not fun to photograph, but you can kind of see how it's evolving and changing, which I enjoy because every time you're seeing it, it's something a little different. And this is a view of a skull here, and it feels almost a little bit abstracted, like these would be the eye holes here, like you're looking straight at it, but you're actually looking at it from below, looking up, so that's pretty interesting. As to why I enjoy doing bones, why I enjoy doing anatomy, most art is created of the human form, and that's usually based in figurative art, drawing people interacting in the world and history and time and space. And I was more interested in kind of talking about what's beyond all of that and what's inside. And it's all kind of, it sort of strips away the context. And so it's sort of just showing us and revealing to us what we all have, but we don't see. I'm also a yoga instructor, so I find the interiors of the body and the idea of healing and energetic properties that are built within us also is a very powerful tool, and that also informs my work. Lastly, before we get started on the demonstration, I do like to dabble in some oil painting as well. So some that I've been playing around with are actually oil paintings on paper. The paper is supposed to be for oil painting, so I hope that it will age okay, but this is kind of, I'm again playing around with the same idea here of kind of showing bones, of showing interiors, and this is actually one that was found in an archaeological site. So this is sort of the remains, and I find that also very interesting with drawing bones, is that they're sort of the last, bits of us that sort of stay with us in the physical world when we're gone, So looking at things like this, like archaeological sites, are also as interesting to me as looking at old medical textbooks. So the other one I just wanted to show too was one that I found in a painting, and I kind of just did my own little version of it here. So it's a hand actually putting their finger in it. So it's kind of funny actually. So this kind of also gives you an idea of just, where my references come from. I look at, other pieces of art. I look at a lot of textbooks. I like looking at past scientific ideas, and I also teach medical illustration, so I'm constantly looking at current scientific ideas as well, along with teaching yoga, which brings more of an Eastern philosophy into my work. So that is my lightning speed artist talk there. And I'm just gonna show you all briefly how to get something started. So I have my piece of paper behind me here that you can see, and I'm gonna be drawing from a textbook today that I just kind of have, this being my subject matter, and it's a really great book. It's called Human Anatomy, and I have all my medical students get it, and it has a lot of really neat illustrations, really great essays in it as well that kind of talk about the history of recording the body and the relationship of artists and physicians from, the Middle Ages all the way up to contemporary and the digital age. So I actually pulled just, kind of moves through the history of drawing, and I have some bone drawings here. So these are some studies from William Cheselden, who's a really famous sort of artist and drawer in the 1700s of England. So what we're gonna do today is pull some material from this and sort of just start to get a quick sketch up, and then I'll show you just a little bit of inking on what I would do. So a lot of times I will take parts of something that I like. So I wouldn't just copy this page exactly as it is. I'm going to take a fragment of this skull here and then this part here. And I've done this before where I kind of make my own little collages almost on the paper. And I'm thinking, what I was thinking with using, this top portion of the skull and then this front part and having them sort of broken apart is it's kind of showing displacement within the body. So that's sort of the thoughts that I'm gonna be having as I move through this. So to start out, very simply, I'm just gonna use a pencil. So I'm just gonna use this mechanical pencil here. Nothing too fancy. I do have other, pencils that are B and HB and all that, but I'm just gonna keep it simple for the purposes of today. Scoot this a little closer. And also just a simple eraser. I find that Ticonderoga makes great erasers. They will erase anything, and they don't rip up the paper either. So that's kind of my little trick there. So to really get started, let me go ahead and get my book propped up so that I can see it okay. Let's see, I'm gonna move. Doing a little bit of rearranging. Okay. Well, actually, I think I'll just put it in my lap. I think that'll be better, I can see. So the main idea is to first sort of envision where things are going to fall on the page. If you notice, a lot of my artwork doesn't actually have, it doesn't reach the edge of the page. I kind of like everything to sit in the middle and to have some breathing space around the drawing. So I like having space around things so that way everything kind of sits and has its own, place to be observed in. So that's my personal preference. I have challenged myself to push things to the edge of the page, but for today I think I'm just going to show you what I would normally do. So I want to think about the size of things. I want to think about where they're going to fall before I start doing any sort of pen. So I'm going to take my pencil and very simply just kind of start out here and just kind of make a general circle here, what this is going to be. I know it's going to be a little hard to see right now. It might be better if I turn my light off. That might help. And let me close the blind just a little bit. Okay, that should help a little bit. So I'm just starting out with sort of laying out where things can fall. And the idea is really, and this is what I teach my students a lot, is the idea is getting a rough sketch on the page. So getting ideas down in a matter of moments. So right now I've just kind of laid out one part of the skull is going to go here, and then the front part of the jaw is going to go here, and there's a nice amount of space in between them. So once I have that and I like that, I'm going to start to work a little bit more into it and start to just get some really simple, basic, sort of laying things out. I'm going to draw it a little darker than I normally would, just so that, we can see it in the video, hopefully okay. Let's see, this kind of goes here. I think this is going to reach out a little more. So the main thing that I always teach my students is that we're always going to need to change something. Everything's always kind of moving around, and that's okay. So if you don't get things right off the get-go, just keep moving, keep changing it. Before, you really want to make sure that you like what's going on with the pencil drawing before we add in any pen, because the thing with pen is once it's on, it doesn't come off. So make sure that you get on paper what you like. Be fussy, be particular. The pencil will erase, the pen will not. It seems like a very simple idea, but you'd be amazed how much we sometimes kind of push our way through something and then realize, it's not really working out. So yeah, this is going to shoot over a lot more, like this. And I'm going to get my eraser now and start to take things off that I don't need anymore. There we go. So this one's a little bit of a trickier angle that I'm drawing, so just going to keep measuring, keep relating things together. Always thinking about the overall shape before details. So always thinking about working from large to small, working from simple to more difficult, right? And this is kind of what I really like to go over with my students, because this is what we should be doing anyways in our lives, right? If we're learning how to cook, I'm not going to start off with the souffle. I'm going to learn how to make toast and eggs, right? So we don't need to make it rocket science just yet. Get it into a place that you like it, and that it's good. Okay, so that's pretty good there. Yeah, and I might shift things around when I start to use my pen, and that's okay. All right, now I'm gonna work into this one here a little more. Thinking like the nose cavity is gonna be a big one to kind of really get into place. There we go. And drawing is a practice, so the more that you do it, the more comfortable you're going to get with it. And the more that you just keep trying and trying, it will get easier. I promise. All right. So we'll get something like that. And then there would be a bunch of teeth here, which we probably will not have time to get in, and that's okay. So that's sort of my basic sketch. So I'm gonna pull it a little closer to you here so you can see for yourself. We've got this part of our skull here, and then this part here. Ah, nice, my hands are already dirty. All right. So I brought out a bunch of Micron pens today. So these are really nice ones to use, especially if you're newer to this. And they come in all sorts of sizes. So I've got a whole bunch here because I like to use them and I use them for my class. It's good for people who are newer to using pen to use these because they can provide a lot of detail, and they're easy to use, they're easy to access. So they come in a whole bunch of different sizes, and what I'm gonna do is start out with probably more of a bigger one, and then I'm gonna work into smaller areas using a smaller pen. So I'm gonna start out with a 5, and then I'll probably work into a 3, and then there's an 005, which is a really tiny one. Okay. So I will probably mainly focus on this one here so you guys can see this really reach a point of being finished. What I'm going to do is start to look into spaces that are really dark. I'm going to start making lines that sort of represent what I see. So my lines are going to be different. This part's really smooth. This one's a little more kind of craggly looking. And what I'm going to do is just sort of, this pen's about to be done. I'm going to start to get a little bit more information on the page. So I'm not using my pencil lines, I'm kind of using those as guidelines, and now I'm going to start to get more texture to the line, start to give my piece a little bit more personality. So this whole part here is really cool looking. I'm really kind of drawn to this. I'm really excited to get into this and get more detail. Cool. Let me see if I have another one. This one's running out of ink already. That seems better. There we go. This one doesn't like it either. I think we'll move back to this one. Gotta retest my pen soon. They do run out of ink eventually. So what I'm gonna do now is start to get some lines in. So there's 2 ways to do this: hatching, which is what I normally use, and cross hatching. So a hatched line, very simply, I'll just do a little demo. I'm gonna use this blue one so we can see it better. A hatched line is very simply lines that work together, they go in the same direction. A lot of times they curve like this. And then cross hatching is when you have a line going in a different direction like this. And so the tighter you can get these lines in together, then the more detail you start to get into the drawing. So you'll see on places here, I use a lot of very, light, very close together lines to start to get all these different layers of depth and of tone. So what I'm gonna do is start to take my pen and start to really get some lines in here, because that's gonna make the drawing feel a little bit more sound. So this one's great because it already kind of shows me the direction of the lines. If you're working from life or something, it's gonna be a little trickier. But you can start to see there's a lot right here, so I'm just going to start really layering in lines. And I really enjoy doing really short strokes like this, and then sort of just layering and layering and layering them, because I find it's easier for me to make a series of short lines and build those up gradually than try to do many long lines that kind of work in a continuous flow. A lot of times the longer the line is, then the harder it can be for us to maintain, the same width, the same consistency. If you want it to be straight, it can start to get really tricky. Okay, there's a little line right here. Great. And we got a little section here by the nose. And this is what I do. You do it until it feels done or it feels right. And when I'm doing short lines like this, I do a lot of wrist motions. If I'm doing, like in the beginning, you might have noticed I was doing more work with my arms. So when I'm doing big, broad strokes, it's better to use your arm than constantly pull my wrist, and then you're gonna start to get those little waves and dips in the lines. If you really want a smooth, continuous stroke, go full arm. And when you're doing a rough sketch, full arm is really, really great. So drawing from your shoulder and not using your wrist. I use the wrist when I'm getting into more detail, like I am now. So just gonna keep flowing lines in here. There's lots and lots and lots of lines. And like anything, your hand will just start to kind of get into the flow of it. It'll get warmed up. It'll start to feel really natural. Start to get a few over here. Start to get some detail in this eyeball. The lines start to get a little more spaced out here. So you can use the width and the closeness of the lines to get darker spaces. You can use the space between them to get lighter areas. So you can definitely play around with that as well. The direction, the length of the lines. Seems really, really obvious, but just really, the more I think about this in my drawings, then the more I'm able to capture on the page, the more information I'm able to give to the viewer about what I saw. And the thing that's really fun about these drawings too, especially when I make up my own compositions, is that everybody sees something different. So what I'm thinking of might be something completely different than what the viewer sees, and I like that because I think that we should give the viewer the capacity to come up with their own decisions. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch to a different pen. Oh, this one's got some life to it. Do some cross-hatching here. And I'm just going to keep going over certain portions until I get them to be as dark as I really think they need to be. This area here has got a lot of fun little squiggly lines and information, so I'm just going to be a little bit more free and open-handed with this. So there's some sections I'm just going to kind of black in and then sort of just let my lines do the rest of the work here. That's the thing when you use any sort of reference image, is it doesn't have to necessarily be a copy of something. It can be your interpretation, right? That's what a drawing is a lot of times, is it's information, but it's also information in the way that you want to relay it. That gives you a little feel for that. All right, we're starting to run out of time, so I'm gonna just kind of show a few other spaces. That does not do that. Let's see. Start to blacken this area here in the nose. So I have my lines going in one direction, they're very close together, so that it's obviously a lot darker than, say, a space like this on the drawing. And then I'm just going to cross-hatch now. So very, very close lines. This is one of the darkest areas in the page, so I feel comfortable with doing very, very close knit cross-hatched areas. Excellent. And then just areas around, there's a few spaces that look almost completely blackened, so I'm just going to take my pen and kind of fill those in. And I don't want to do this too much. I don't want to completely black out areas because then it starts to look a little too contrasty. And contrasts can be great, and obviously working with black pen on a white surface naturally brings about contrast, but we really do want to avoid it feeling like it only has two things to say. I really like to use the lines to create a variety of tone within it and not have it be very high and low value. So on that note, I'm just going to do a little more work in here and I think we'll call it done. Like I said, they can be time consuming, so it's tough for me to finish one in 20 minutes, but this kind of gives you an idea of how it would get started. So a lot of times this is also an exercise in patience, right? And start to add some more light lines here. This side of the skull is very light. I might go in with one more dark pen. Let's see. It's always good to have a little piece of paper to practice on. I'm just using the bottom part of my page here. Gonna go back into this space here to darken it even more. Start to darken this space right here. And I would continue to kind of do that, pulling back and forth until I made it feel more complete, like this one here. So this is what I was going for. And I also used this one here. And so here's what I managed to get done in that time. I did start to get some nice tone, some nice layers in here. And then I did get a nice kind of rough sketch of that front part of the face as well. So the last thing I was just gonna share before we're completely finished is that after I do this and I'm, ink in everything I want, once it's dry, which, ink dries very quickly, I take my eraser and erase away what I don't need anymore. So notice this is not moving or shifting where the ink is. It's just taking away those sort of rough sketch lines, and now I'm left with a beautiful drawing. And it looks a lot more clean and professional. The other trick that I love to share as well is if you didn't notice, I'm left-handed, which means lefties, and this can happen to righties too, we're very prone to get things dirty and to smudge. So if you're worried about smudging at any point, use a magazine piece of paper. A magazine paper is very glossy, and what it does is it will kind of move with your hand around the page, and this protects your hand from smudging. So the paper is very light and smooth, and it will not move or shift what's on the page too much. So that's sort of my little tip for those of us who are lefty or maybe prone to get smudges on our page. I hope everybody found this useful and informative. Thank you so much for tuning in, and follow me on Instagram, Hannah Stahulak Art. I'm sure we'll post it on there. Otherwise, have an awesome day. Thanks a lot.